Prepare for launch. 3, 2, 1.
Hi there. Happy New Year. This is Mark Pukita, and this is our first 2022 episode of Mark Pukita's Truth Bomb. Thanks for joining us. The idea here, if you're new, is we're going to educate you and expose you to things that are going on in Ohio that you might not be aware of, and many of them are not good, and we need to fix them by being truthful about them and having honest discussions about how we need to cure the problems we've got, specifically in the conservative Republican movement in Ohio. So thanks for being with us today. We really appreciate it. Tonight, we've got a jam-packed schedule. The first thing that'll happen is Chris Hicks, who's usually my sidekick on these truth bombs, will be interviewing John Adams. John is a Republican candidate for Secretary of State. He's primarying Frank LaRose. John is from Sydney, and I think you'll be very interested in what John has to say, and you'll get probably an earful about what needs to be done in terms of election reform in Ohio. The second topic we'll talk about is the February 4th, that's Friday, February 4th, Ohio Republican Party State Central Committee meeting that's happening in Lewis Center, just north of Columbus, on that Friday, February 4th. Anybody that was at the last, so we are going to have a room there that will hold a minimum of 150 people. And the reason we're doing this, we are going to live stream the event from another room in the same facility. Why are we doing it? Because last time, I believe intentionally, they made the corral for guests who are really members of the Republican Party like you and me. They made the corral for those people smaller while they still had space there that could have held another 60 to 100 people to keep people from seeing what's going on at the Ohio Republican Party and within the Ohio Republican Party State Central Committee, which is the governing body of the Republican Party in Ohio. So we will have a room. It'll be live streamed, so you can be comfortable. We don't want you bringing your recliners, but you could bring, one of those little lounger portable things you take to a tailgate. But no, we'll have seating and all. We'll have a facility, and we'll have space for 150 people to watch the live stream of the event in the same facility, just in case Banana Republic, Bob Paduchik, wants to try to figure out a way to keep you from seeing the Ohio Republican Party State Central Committee meeting. So that'll be number 2. And if Bob decides he's going to do it by Zoom instead, we'll live stream it there and we'll have a bit of a party. So please, Chris Hicks will tell you a little later about the website page, but you can go to mark4ohio.com, our website, mark4ohio.com, and you can go there and go to events, and you'll see this meeting, and you can RSVP, and you go to Eventbrite and sign up. We think that we will have a packed house that day. The third item we'll go through is policy roulette. For those of you that have been with us before, we'll pick topics out of a bucket, and I'll just talk about policy items that are on my, 21-point policy guide. I'm the only U.S. Senate candidate that has written down policy positions. So I can't squirm out of them and be on the fence and wiggle and be a swamp rhino like everybody else. And then finally, we'll have a campaign update where we'll talk about what is going on in terms of our campaign, the ads we've got going on and things like that. But I'll hold the details on that for later. We started our radio ad campaign this morning, and I think that there'll be some provocative, contentious, humorous, kind of contrastful kind of things that you'll see from us across the state. I'm seeing everybody say, hey, we're here. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for coming, folks. Let's get to our first segment. I'm going to turn it over to Chris Hicks. I'm going to bow out, and Chris is going to interview John Adams. Welcome, John. Thanks for coming. And
all right, so I get to pick up here, John, and so I want to introduce everybody to Mr. John Adams. So he is running for Secretary of State against Frank LaRose, that we are told, John, is the finest Secretary of State in the entire United States in terms of his commitment to election integrity, but we'll hear what you have to say about it. And I want to start out, I want to thank Mr. Adams for joining us. We see him out on the campaign trail. It's not as if, per se, Mark endorses John or John endorses Mark, although I can guess I think I know who Mark's going to vote for in this. It's as much as about citizen candidates and people that are in the conservative Republican movement standing up, stepping up, and trying to make us into a better, more conservative state in what we do and how we approach it. So, John, welcome to Mark Pukita's Ohio Truth Bomb. And I'm going to go right into questions. And so my first question, John, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Who the heck is John? I think I heard of you. You look pretty young for as old as John Adams should be at this point in time. But tell us a little bit about who you are, your bio, your background, and your qualifications.
Well, thank you, Chris, and thank you also for having me on. Well, I've been married to Tara for 38 years. We have 7 children. I'm a small business owner in West Central Ohio, Sydney, Ohio. We're in the furniture business, and it is 4th generation. I would not be doing this if it wasn't for my 2 sons in the last 5 years, learning the business and myself teaching it. And thankfully, it's going on to the 4th generation. Very few make it that far, and it's a good business to be in. It's tough, like every business is right now. But been married to Tara for 38 years, as I said. I served in the Navy. I was a Navy SEAL. I served at SEAL Team 3, did 2 deployments from 83 to 1987. Returned to Ohio with Tara and learned the business. I served in the 8 years under 2 different administrations, one Democrat under Strickland and one Kasich, Republican. I saw how it operated. When I left, I would have to say I was jaded. I was naive when I went in and learned a lot about how it works and defining the word conservative. Everybody likes to call themselves a conservative, but boy, that word's really been misused. And everybody calls themselves a conservative in the Republican Party, and it's just not the truth. And there's very few real conservatives in the Republican Party. It's a smaller percentage than the whole. Served there for 8 years and returned, ran for the state Senate against Matt Huffman. I lost, which was a blessing. Otherwise, my 2 sons would not have learned the business. I would have been in Columbus thinking that I was saving the world, but obviously you don't. And everything worked out the way it should have. And because of that, after that last election in 2020, President Trump, the 45th president, did not win. And I said to myself, and my wife and I had a discussion, do something about it. And we decided to run for Secretary of State because our current Secretary of State has a lot of flaws.
So, John, thank you for your bio. So I noticed, and I appreciate you started with your wife, your family, and then your military experience, and your business experience. So I think you did wife, family, business experience, military experience. So you've got the whole profile of somebody. You're in your legislative experience, so you got a lot of things you threw in there. So you're not somebody just walking in the door first time where you've been involved in politics and you've had experience. Now, I have been told that I think a lot of people know I'm friends with Tom Brinkman. And Tom Brinkman one time told me, when you're running against an incumbent, you need to have 2 things. You need to have, first, why should the voters fire them? Why should the voters fire the incumbent in favor of you? And then why should they vote for you? If they need to why should they fire the incumbent? And why are you the right replacement for that incumbent? So why don't we start? I like the exciting part first. Why should Frank LaRose be fired in your mind?
Well, it's a long list. That is a long list, Chris. It's a long list.
I'm watching the clock here. I'm going to give you 2 minutes or 3 minutes.
I'll do it quickly. And
Okay.
Everybody can go to my website and they can look at the voter guide, but I'll go quickly. He's a never Trumper for one. Supports mandatory photo ID. He does not support mandatory voter ID. I do. He canceled the Ohio primary election hours before it was supposed to take place, and I can speak further on that later. He took Zuckerberg money, $1.3 million alone to the Secretary of State's office. That does not include the 44 counties that also took money under his supervision. He supports online voting. He supports automatic voter registration. He wanted to mail every single registered voter in Ohio a ballot. He supported drop boxes in every county throughout Ohio. He accused President Trump of racism. And he was a board member on it's called Kids Voting. He was a board member on it, and the Secretary of State's office supported it, and it taught critical race theory. Once that was exposed, he dropped off the board and no longer supports it. That's his list. It's not a good list. And to answer it, I can do a better job. Simple as that.
So you're already jumping to the next question. Why you in his place? Why are you the best replacement for Frank LaRose?
Because I'm tough. I believe in voter integrity, for one. I want to see a mandatory voter ID, which we haven't had. You can walk into polling place and present yourself 7 different ways to vote. We only need one: strict voter ID. That needs to get passed by the legislature and put into place.
Okay.
That's one.
Well, I personally, go ahead.
Now, go ahead. You personally what?
Well, I personally saw like when the election was postponed, the primary election, when we decided to change space and time on the calendar, that I don't know if I told you this. I think I told you this. I did some record request and found out that Frank LaRose, his press release was drafted by the governor's office. And one of the things I think that grassroots and citizen candidates are worried about is a lack of check and balances between these people who are oftentimes not conservatives. You mentioned LaRose being a never Trumper. You said you were tough. Do you think that you can be a check and balance between the other statewide elected officials who have R's behind their names when it comes to these election integrity issues?
I can tell you that it would not have caved to the pressure from the governor to change that date. The Secretary of State's office is its own office. It's a constitutionally, by the Constitution, it's its own office. And I do not have to do what the governor tells me to do.
Right.
The only person that could have changed, Chris, the only person that could have changed that would have been the legislature. Yeah, that's the only authority that changed the date on that primary. And it was only 4 days prior that he stood there at a podium with Amy Acton and said, we went to extraordinary measures to make sure that this election is safe. 4 days later, it gets canceled.
And I think had Richard Cordray been governor and made the same request to LaRose, what do you think the response would have been? Totally. It shows you the lack of check and balance by how they behave differently and how they're not necessarily really conservatives when they behave differently. As long as the person has an R behind their name, I'll let them do something that's against our Constitution that I would never let somebody with a D behind their name do.
Correct. And that I witnessed that when I was in office for 8 years. We fought tooth and nail against Strickland. As soon as it switched to an R, we had super majorities in both chambers, and it was the opposite. Everything we fought for and against on Strickland, we could have implemented in the Kasich administration, and we didn't.
Right.
We didn't. Not one bit. And
so it becomes show. It's conservative show versus conservative heart in terms of the way a lot of these people react.
Heart and mind. Heart and mind. And like you said, checks and balances. And then it goes right back to one single word: Constitution.
So
checks and balances.
Okay, so let me ask you another question here. Move on here. If you were Secretary of State, what are sort of the top? You mentioned voter ID, but beyond that, what are the top 2, 3, 4 things that you would think should be changed about the office? Would do differently? What would be your key agenda points?
Agenda number one, as I said, would be voter ID, strict voter ID. And when we're talking about voter ID, currently we don't check to see if they're a citizen. That's not checked. That would need to be checked. The other thing I would do is it's not a new idea. I'd set up an office for voter fraud. My initial thoughts on this were the prosecutors need an incentive to prosecute fraud. There isn't any. You can't throw money at them because it's political. Whether it's a D or an R, you can't rely on that. Governor DeSantis in his budget proposal said, look, we're going to prosecute fraud. We're going to set up our own department, and we're going to have investigators. We're going to have everything that's required to prosecute fraud. And he said, you know what? When you start prosecuting fraud, voter fraud, people won't do it anymore. And that's what we have to do, because I don't care what state it is. And a study just came out by I'm pretty sure it was Heritage Foundation. We're ranked right in the middle of all 50 states. For Frank LaRose to say that we have the best secure election system in the nation is phony. It's complete phony. Bottom line is we've institutionalized cheating. We don't look for it.
Right.
We don't look for it unless somebody just blatantly gets caught. We don't look for it. Well, as your next Secretary of State, we're going to have a division that prosecutes fraud. A division all on its own. That's what I want. That's what I'm going to request.
I think I'm, John, about as conservative as they come. And I remind people, though, and this is a controversial thing to say, that one of our biggest election integrity issues in Ohio is a Republican scandal involving Larry Householder and corporate money being used to buy seats in our legislature, particularly, I think, more in already red districts. And so what's your kind of take on the kind of things that we've seen as scandals amongst Republican people, like bribes with Larry Householder, Cliff Rosenberger before that, looking the other way on ECOT with those kind of things. But, I know Democrats like to talk about campaign finance limits, which I don't think is the problem at all. I think the problem is basically dirty money getting into the mix. What's your reaction to that? And what kind of policy views would you have? You're not the legislature, but you've been a legislature as Secretary of State, cleaning up financing in our campaigns from a standpoint of where the money's coming from.
Well, regarding that, I was there for 8 years, and how we kept the caucus elected was exactly the way that was done. I'm not talking about House Bill 6 at this point. I'm just talking about the way the money came in to fund campaigns. And then all that went into a pot, and the leadership spent it. The campaign leadership spent it. And, if your polling wasn't good, they'd move on to the next race. But a lot of money in Columbus, the lobbying,
Right.
And it needs cleaned up. It needs cleaned up. Now, the Secretary of State's not going to clean that up, but the legislature itself needs to take a hard look. And that's not even said. Just clean it up. Just clean it up. Just recognize the problem and do something about it.
Well, and I think that the Secretary of State's office plays a vital role in terms of campaign finance reporting and campaign finance reporting accountability. And I think Mr. LaRose has been completely derelict in duty and on that front. And you have to, it is always in Ohio, if people pay attention, any of the scandals that come to light are always because the feds get involved, because our actual statewide people don't, they don't come from there. So let me move on to the next question. I just saw that you were endorsed by Ohio Value Voters, so congratulations on that interest group endorsement. So how you feel about getting the Ohio Republican Party primary endorsement, and where do you stand on the Ohio Republican Party primary endorsement process?
I'll be happy to take the Ohio Republican Party endorsement in the general.
That's called the voters voted you through,
but not in the primary.
Right.
I sit on the our county Republican Party, and we changed our bylaws when we took it over 2 years ago. Okay. And we said we will not endorse in primaries anymore. That is for the voters to decide. We are going to stay out of it as a county, and that's the way it should be in every county and statewide, in my opinion. Obviously, there's other people that want to be kingmakers, and they don't see it that way. But that leaves out the voter. The voters aren't. Frank LaRose is there because they want him there.
Right.
The Republican Party wants him there.
You mean he's not a product of a popular uprising of voters that love Frank LaRose?
No.
So, okay, my last question, then I'll get some of your closing thoughts. is what's up? What is up, John Adams, with when are we going to see a Secretary of State candidate forum? And why isn't somebody like Jack Windsor or, some of these other groups that have done forums like the Center for Christian Virtue, why aren't they? They're very excited about doing Senate forums, which is an open seat, but they aren't so excited about doing forums where there's incumbents in office. What's your reaction, and what do you see on the horizon in terms of any candidate forums around Secretary of State?
It does make it tough for outside candidates to take on incumbents. It just does. They have the advantage up and down the chart, period. They just do. It's the way it works. I get it, but I don't think he would debate me anyway. I don't believe he would. But I would love to debate the guy because his record is lousy. Nobody knows it. And that's what a debate would do, is expose what he's done as Secretary of State, which it's not a good record when you look at this. It just isn't.
Well, I think the key is that those people out there, maybe Jack Windsor or somebody else is listening, they should just call a forum. If Frank LaRose won't show up, doesn't show up, isn't there, then you get more time to answer questions, and it says something. I mean, to me, as Republicans, we should stand for voter education. And I saw a clip that I think somebody on Mark's team actually made of LaRose getting all testy with people, asking him questions where somebody was videoing him. And I tell you, when our candidates don't have to be in forums and they get protected from them, it makes for weaker people. It makes for weaker people, less in touch with the citizens, and with less of a feeling of what people really care about because they're in an ivory tower. So I hope that somebody will get some forums going. Have there been any forums for Secretary of State?
No, and I can see why at this point. Once everybody is filed and we've all cleared the hurdle of our petitions, I think you're going to see an uptick in voter interest, and you might see a candidate forum for Secretary of State. I'd like to see it.
I think we'd all like to see it. I think. I wish you the best of luck. I will commit to, I'm giving you my personal endorsement, which is worth
well, thank you, Chris.
It might be worth, I have a lot of friends who are my neighbors are friends, and I'm all for personal endorsements. I'm not for organizational or party endorsements in particular, right, which are meant to rig the system. But I appreciate, I've gotten to know you just a little bit thus far in at some events. And I appreciate you standing up and win, lose, or draw, primarying Mr. LaRose to have a real discussion within the Republican Party about what do we stand for? Like, why on earth would we have a Republican Secretary of State that is not for universal voter ID? That is crazy. That is not Republican.
It's not Republican, and it's not something that's pushed in all the states. I mean, some yes, but most no. And I don't understand it. I don't understand it at all. It's a simple concept. Everybody understands it except the political party.
Right.
I don't get it.
Right.
You need that ID for everything.
Well,
that'll eliminate a lot of fraud right there.
I'm going to close with this, and I'm going to bring Mr. Pukita on for a second. My wife right now is taking a friend of mine from Poland to the airport. And I tell you, and if you've been overseas, if you go to places and you say to them that it's actually a debate in the United States as to whether you have to show an ID to vote, they cannot believe that would be a debate. I've been in over 50 countries, and I've probably asked the question to probably in 20 of them at least. And there's not another country that I'm aware of that doesn't believe that you have to have some proper ID to be able to vote. They're shocked that it's even a discussion here.
Yes, and that tells you something. I just recently read an article. I looked at the date on it. It was 2015, and it was exactly what you're talking about. All the European countries over there are shocked that we don't have a strict voter ID in this country.
Right.
And you know why? Because it permits fraud, and it's institutionalized for decades, and it happens in all the major cities.
And it says a lot about it. If you would believe what the Democrats say, that it's too hard to get an ID, then it's also, they are condemning an educational system that after 12 years can't teach people enough in school to be able to get a proper ID. to be able to have a productive life. It is enslavement if that is the case. Now, I'm going to bring on Mr. Pukita, who has informed me he has a set of 18 additional questions he would like to ask. You know,
Yes, John.
Mark,
Let's start with question 1, subsection A. Now, I just want to say thank you for coming on, and maybe if no news outlet will do a debate or a forum with you and Frank LaRose, maybe we could do it here on the Truth Bomb. So I'll make you the offer, and I'll make Frank the offer, and I'll do it on social media either tonight or tomorrow morning, that you come on and you just have a conversation about why each of you is the best candidate. Would you be okay with that?
I'd be fine with that.
Mark, I would throw on there too is that you'll let Frank LaRose. Now, John, you may or may not like this, but I'd say Frank LaRose can pick the moderator and he can make the rules. So if he wants it to be that he gets 3 minutes and Mr. John Adams only gets 1 minute. So we want it to be I always love to have it be so ridiculously fair, like that he can pick the moderator. Mike DeWine can be the moderator if that's what Frank LaRose wants.
Over the top fair.
Fine. I'll take whatever rules are thrown at me. I'd love to debate the guy.
And he was a Green Beret and you were a Navy SEAL? Okay.
Correct.
So
Correct.
You both have those credentials.
That's true. I factored that in when I decided to run. It nullifies our military differences. It's fine. I thank him for his service, and I'm
sure he's vice versa. I mean, we just have to get to the substance of the matter here, and it's voter fraud.
Correct.
Well, it's voter fraud. It's voting integrity. It is educated voters. It's campaign finance. It's all these things that I feel like Frank LaRose has no real agenda on. It's integrity to the Constitution. He outright went against the Constitution when he changed the primary election. And it's a series of things. I can't imagine a Democrat Secretary of State would have done more dumb things along the way as Frank LaRose has done.
Bingo.
Right. As a matter of fact, if you just look at the list that he's compiled, it's not far from Stacey Abrams pulled off in Georgia.
Right. Including
it's almost identical. It's almost
I saw your communication today about the 1.3 million from Zuckerberg that LaRose took. We got to move on. So John, what's your website? Why don't you tell people your website so they can check it out?
Website is johnadams4oh.com. johnadams4oh.com.
The number 4 or the word 4?
The word 4. Sorry about that.
Okay.
One thing I want to add before you kick me off. We need to audit. We need a forensic audit to look under that rug that's never been looked at ever. That nobody's looked under the rug. So we don't know where it's at. But I guarantee it's there.
Right. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Adams, for joining us. And we are going to move on, Mark.
John, thanks so much.
You and I.
Thank you both very much. And you have a good evening.
We're going to move on to segment 2, which is going to be on February 4th, the next ORP meeting.
So the next Ohio Republican Party State Central Committee meeting is going to be on Friday, February 4th. And if you were at the last meeting or you saw the video of the last meeting, you'll see that it is a staged kind of Politburo kind of game that's being played by the leaders of the Ohio Republican Party, namely Bob Paduchek, the chairman, and I'll throw in there Dave Johnson, the treasurer. And they stage the room so members of the Republican Party, us, who they like to classify as guests, really couldn't watch the meeting, which is a public meeting, and they're supposed to have room for viewers as well, or participants, as well as an overflow room if in fact they run out of space. So they didn't do it, but we're going to provide the overflow room. We are going to provide a room with at least 100 space for 150 people. It'll be at the same site as the meeting. So if you're in the meeting, great. If not, you can come into our space and you can watch the live stream of the meeting, which will be live streaming from the same facility. I know it sounds weird, but that's what we have to do because the Ohio Republican Party hierarchy does not want to allow the voting kind of grassroots Republican voter to see what's going on, including exposing the approximate $2 million accounting regularity that they won't get audited, even though the bylaws of the Ohio Republican Party say the book should be audited every year. They haven't had an audit in 16 years. So that's what we're going to be doing. You can sign up at Eventbrite. Chris Hicks will kind of come on here and clean up the mess that anything I didn't cover, he'll clean up. He'll be the cleanup guy, but there's an Eventbrite invite you can go to, and we're really, really excited about this event because I think, Chris, it is exposing how but it's educating and exposing. It's educating Republican voters on how the party works, which the party doesn't want to do in Ohio. They want to keep everything a secret. And number two, it's exposing the corruption. So what else do you have to say? What could you add to that? What did I forget?
Here's the most important thing is hopefully they'll have enough room for everybody in their room. So I don't know about, we'll have overflow capability in that the second room. But I think the most important thing is we're going to have a post event in the room that you have reserved after the ORP meeting. This will be, I think, the last chance they'll have to try to jam through endorsements of Mike DeWine. And I don't know how this is playing out, but originally Paduchek, everybody, the word on the street was his two missions in life were to get Mike DeWine and Jane Timken endorsed as the insider candidates. And, you have been pretty resolute, Mark, in no endorsements. You have been even resolute to the point that some of the people who are running against endorsements, but then come up with backdoor ways that someday in the future we'll do endorsements. You're even telling them what they don't want to hear. It's like, no, we just got to get this disease out of the system.
Right.
Where we think that the political party is going to dictate who wins the primaries. That's not the purpose of the political party to do that.
Right.
You just started an ad. You've got an ad campaign that just started. There's an ad campaign focused more on the Senate race in particular, forthcoming. But, I admire your commitment to this topic. And you just started an ad that's running on iHeartRadio and on stations in Columbus and Cleveland. I'm going to go ahead and play that ad for everybody.
Mark Pukita, a Republican candidate for U.S. Senate, and I approve this message that is about something bigger than my U.S. Senate campaign. I'm sick of fake Republicans like Lockdown Mike DeWine and Bribery Larry Householder. I'm sick of lack of accountability. I'm fed up with pay-to-play Ohio Republican Party politics and primary endorsements meant to block grassroots competition. We need to reform our Republican Party. It's time to end Ohio Republican Party primary endorsements to restore election integrity in Republican primaries. Republican Party leaders meet again on Friday, February 4th in Columbus. Learn more, attend, and reserve a spot at a post-meeting event at mark4ohio.com. That's Mark, the number 4, ohio.com. This message is paid for by Mark Pukita for U.S. Senate 2022 Committee. Let's go, Brandon.
Okay, so there's the ad that's playing. So I think that's a critical message. Hopefully it'll get out to people. We've had people trying to game the Eventbrite already.
Yep.
To fill up all the slots in the Eventbrite to prevent you from seeing slots. So check it out. Don't assume that the slots are taking up if it tells you that the tickets are sold out. We'll keep trying to clean that up.
We're keeping
an eye.
Here's
the other thing that's going on. Mark has made a commitment to try to help people running for State Central Committee and to take back control of State Central Committee. And there's 4 main things. If you support these things, you can send a note to info@mark4ohio.com. And that is that you are against, you want to no more ORP primary endorsements. Or you want there to be a real audit of the ORP books. You want on the record roll call votes at State Central Committee. and you want live streaming of ORP State Central Committee meetings. These seem like pretty non-controversial things, Mark, but apparently they are controversial with some audiences. And but that's been your commitment. Why don't you talk for just a second about if people are interested, how you're going to support them?
Yeah. So let me just go through the three things I think quickly, Chris, that we've got issues with. We've got issues with primary endorsements by the Ohio Republican Party. We've got issues with the state central committee members endorsing themselves. So we wonder why we don't get any change on state central committee. They endorse themselves. And then finally, this audit of the financials, which isn't being done. There's a $2 million accounting disparity that can't be accounted for and needs to be audited by an outside audit firm, and they're fighting it. In my experience in business, any company owner that was fighting an audit probably had something nefarious going on there. So that needs to be done. So what we're going to do is we've got a two-part program. The first part is if someone will sign a pledge to those four issues you just put on the screen, and they get ballot access to become a candidate for a state central committee seat in their district, in their area, we will give them a $250. I'll do it personally from my own personal account, $250 to kickstart their campaign. And they've got to be the first, and they've just got to show us information that they've gotten ballot access by taking their signatures to the Board of Election, getting those signatures approved, and getting on the ballot. $250 for the first male and the first female in a district, because that's the way it works. There are 66 of these people around the state representing grassroots Republicans. In each of the 33 districts, there's a male and a female. And we'll give out $250 to the first person who gets ballot access. That's a citizen candidate, signs that pledge to take on the swamp rhinos that are there right now. The second piece would be more intense in terms of giving people more money. Well, we'd be doing mailings for them. I don't know if you want to go into that detail right now, Chris. I know we want to try to keep these things to a reasonable amount of time, but we can talk about those if you think we got enough time left.
Well, I think the key is out of the people that you identify that you funded, we will figure out what are the most important races to provide some additional support into, because as you've talked about on there before, and we've talked about on there before, there's an element, there's two things important on the state central committee is getting more votes to vote with malcontents and people trying to drive reform. And the other is to get more skills so that there can be people on there that can put on a real effort to fight back against the corruption of that body and kind of clean up that body. So I think those are the two things: the $250 up front, and then the potential support for a certain number of campaigns. And we talked about that some. If you want to learn, if people want to learn more about this, I went to your website here, Mark. Yep. So right now it's at the very top of the website. So you might not be able to read it here, but there's a link up at the very top. It's the February 4th ORP meeting and running for state central committee. And the run for state central committee actually has a learn more tab that goes into a pretty significant amount of detail about how to run for state central committee and what the policy is around it. So go to Mark's website, check it out. Even if you get stuck back at the main part of his website, if you go down, it's at the top, but also if you scroll down to the top featured news stories, the two top featured news stories are running for the Ohio Republican Party State Central Committee and the February 4th Ohio Republican Party meeting. So that's what I would hit on, Mark, out of these two.
Yep.
And why don't we, unless you've got something else you want to add, we could move on to the third segment, which is talking about a couple more policy areas.
Yep.
But before I do that, while I'm here, because I got the website up, if you go out to Mark's website and you click on policy, the policy clicker at the top, policy guide, these are all of if Mark's at 21 areas, people at first say, you got to be kidding me, 21 areas. But you realize if you go out here and start reading these, I guarantee you'll end up reading all of them. And you'll realize, boy, we have really dumbed down politicians and politics, and that we don't have people that address these really important key issues. So let's go into segment 3, which is policy roulette.
Let's say, Chris. Okay, Chris. So for those who haven't been with us before, we've got this 21-point policy guide that you talked about. Policy roulette is where you dig into the Ernst & Young certified bin of the topics we haven't yet covered on this, and you pull out the poker chip that, and we're not for or against gambling. We're agnostic about gambling right now, but you pull out the poker chip that's got a number on it, and we go to that number and we just hit that topic here. So, and you've got the cards up on the screen, so we can see them.
Flip of the cards if I do it all right here, and so I've got the bucket here, the official policy roulette bucket, and I've got the ones that I keep a bag over here. These are the ones we've already covered, so they're in a separate bag.
Ernst & Young certified hermetically sealed bag.
Which one? Here's my card so that I can pull up my card. I'm not going to look.
I got mine right here.
We'll do just a couple of them here for time purposes tonight, Mark.
All right.
I got number 8. So number 8 is the one.
Business and trade. Yeah. Business and trade.
Business and trade.
Yep.
So why don't you jump into number 8, business and trade?
Let me read through the 4 points for everybody, because there may be some people that are just listening. And then we'll talk about them. We'll get a little more freeform here. So point number 1 is reverse regulations that have pushed manufacturing out of the U.S. and Ohio. Point number 2 is fight crony capitalism and regulation that protects insiders from competition. Point number 3 is get back to risk assessment versus a crazy idea that we can eliminate all risk. And that's something that goes across all these items pretty much. And then point number 4, end regulations that force use to foreign suppliers like light bulbs, solar panels, and electric car batteries. So, Chris, the bottom line is that we have allowed Rob Portman, actually, as our trade representative, cut deals with foreign countries on foreign trade that literally legitimized and documented in a contractual form an unlevel playing field for U.S. and Ohio businesses, because he was in that what I'd call that New World Order kind of, we know more than you do kind of strata within the government. I mean, we've got just absolutely unfair advantage. The Chinese have an unfair advantage against us in virtually every realm, whether it comes to civil rights abuses with child labor or the Uyghurs, whether it comes to environmental abuses, whether it just product safety, the list goes on. And Donald Trump had it right. He was like, hey, unless you level the playing field, we're just going to put the tariffs on. Now, people say tariffs are taxes, but there are times you got to take some hard medicine to fix these problems. And in addition to that, here in the United States, we have issues with crony capitalism, where the government is picking favorites, where the government is giving the insiders an opportunity to prosper while keeping out the small businesses, upstarts. We saw that during COVID, where Walmarts and Costco's were open, but lockdown Mike DeWine was keeping small businesses from being open. I mean, it's kind of crazy. And then when we talk about risk assessment, okay, we've got to get out of this mentality. And I think that voters have fallen into it too, where if one person is at risk, or if one person can stand up and say, hey, I've been discriminated against, or there's something that's wrong here, we have to go to the lowest common denominator and make sure And it's a government
Right.
control thing, right? They'll say, oh, we're trying to protect people, but it's all about government control of our lives. And we've just got to get rid of this kind of thinking. It's poisonous.
Well, I think it's not, it's a, I'm going a little bit different than business and trade, but since you mentioned risk assessment, there's never been a time in America when it's easier to, for example, work at home, get your groceries touchless delivered, do all these things. So the risk, your ability, part of risk is your ability to control and manage risk
Yourself,
to you,
right?
and make decisions based on that. So, you know, I don't want to go work on the high steel building size skyscrapers because there's more risk in that than sitting at a desk. Maybe not, but you understand what I'm saying. And you're
Yep.
making a decision, your own personal free decision. And so a lot of these things end up going against that from a business and trade perspective. And I harp on, I love the point about these foreign suppliers. What kind of crazy country mandates products that people have to buy and outlaws products that they can make and forces those products to come from foreign countries?
Yeah. Try to find
how do you get that deal?
Yeah, try to find LED light bulbs that are made in the United States. Just go.
Right.
I went to Lowe's and Home Depot and looked at them. They're all made elsewhere.
Right.
Solar panels, electric car batteries. I want to say Marjorie Taylor Greene, when I met with her, said that her stats showed, and I think my research was similar, about 80% of the electric car batteries are produced in China. Think about that, okay? This is absolute insanity.
All right, so we're gonna do one more of these, then we're gonna move on to a campaign update. And I'm gonna pick one out of here. Let's see which one I got. I got number 21.
Oh, 21. Dang.
So 21.
Yeah. Blackjack.
That is
faith.
Faith.
Okay. So here's policy area 21. I'm going to go through these, but I was almost going to make a joke about Josh Mandel, but I'll save that for later. Point number 1, embrace our Judeo-Christian heritage and its core values. Point number 2, welcome all people of goodwill, whatever their faith. Point number 3, respect and restore religious freedom. And point number 4, recommit to a belief that our inalienable rights come from a power higher than man. So I want to handle that last one first. Because I think we're not teaching civics in schools and we're staying away from religion and any of that, we aren't really teaching our children and our young adults the foundational basics of our country and what makes our country different and makes our form of government work that isn't necessarily in the documents per se, but the founding fathers knew that we had to have these things for our type of government to work. And one of those is that our rights come from God. They do not come from government or other men. And so the government, the founding fathers felt like the only thing the government was there to do was to protect your unalienable God-given rights. And we've moved from that to the government gives you rights. The concept of positive versus negative rights as well. We have just gone off the track, and it's a massive education job that we have to do to educate or re-educate people on just why we are so different and so good in terms of the way we're governed, because we think about a higher being. We think about having to have some moral compass, some character, some principles around which we're structured as a society. And I think that goes hand in hand with the fact that our founding fathers felt that we had to have a Judeo-Christian basis and ethic for our country, because that is not something you can just legislate. You've got to have this community, a desire to do the right thing, to be moral, to have character, to have substance, to not be superficial, to not be hedonistic, to not be narcissistic. And they got it. And I do believe that we have gotten way off the track with that, and we've got to get back.
I think that the inalienable rights element, one time I remember many years ago reading an article that was by an atheist about why atheists should be all in on inalienable rights. Because the point was, even if there isn't a higher power, like an atheist would believe, the belief that there are certain rights that are not able to be curtailed or removed by the government is a fundamentally valuable thing for people of whatever your faith or lack of faith is. That certain freedoms, certain rights come from someplace other than that another man can tell you you have that right or not. And that's the fundamental thing of inalienable rights. And I love articles like the one I'm describing, Mark, because when you get an atheist writing an article like this, it really brings the point home that this concept is beyond just it's beyond just a religion or denomination into a principle that there are certain things that are immutable, that you cannot change. One man cannot have providence over another man on certain rights. Okay, so that's our update for a couple of policy areas tonight. And now we're going to go into a campaign update.
So, Chris, we mentioned it before, but we just started a statewide radio ad blitz that will go on through all of January. The first 2 weeks are going to be about something that I said in the ad is bigger than just me getting elected to the U.S. Senate. It's something that just sticks in my craw and the craw of grassroots conservative principled Republicans, and that is the absolute corruption in the Ohio Republican Party. So we are making people aware of it. We are advertising about it in our ad on the radio, and we are having and this is iHeart talk stations across the state: Cincinnati, Columbus, Cleveland, the Salem stations. Everybody gets covered. If you're in Ohio, there's no way you can miss these if you want to hear them or you listen to radio. And I believe that over time, we'll get more and more people wanting to listen to them, because our first ad will be about corruption. And I think that just when you hear that ad and we talk about the February 4th event, we're seeing more signups to the event. We're seeing a lot of good traction there. But after that, we've got ads that focus more on campaign issues. And there, I think, Chris, 7 additional ads that will be running through the rest of January. And as I said, some of them are going to be contentious and provocative. We're going to talk about issues regarding gender and sexuality and workplace issues, and Josh Mandel and Jane Timken and all these kind of things. I mean, yeah, and health issues and obesity issues and things like that we have to have honest discussions about if we want to improve America and improve the lives of Americans, or allow Americans to improve their own lives. And so that's what we've got on the schedule in terms of our media work. And after that, I don't know. Were you going to play one of the ads, or you?
Yeah, I played the ad for the first ad already. So
I didn't know if you were going to play any others.
The last thing I want to cover, for tonight, because we're up against the clock here, Mark, is that we did a survey thing that I would not call a poll. I would call it a survey.
Yeah.
At best. And I just want to, so we got, and it was something that was it was not scientifically valid, because it was in a pro Pukita thing, but we say, we're realistic and you have lower name ID than most of your competition. But this was the results of 715 responses, where we actually factored out people who were on your campaign already list.
Sign up
And
list,
yeah, on your sign up list. So we took them out, any of them that responded, and it was controlled one response per. But this is I was a little surprised by the reaction we got, because we're 64% selected in your Senate race, undecided or other. 64%. Okay. And every candidate was included. It's not like a Josh Mandel poll or other people's polls where they leave candidates out. And so the 14% Pukita, 6% Moreno, 5% Mandel, 4% Gibbons, 3% Timken, 3% Vance, and 1% Dolan. So Dolan was just over 1%. I would have liked to put a less than 1% there. But it just says something about the state of this race right now. And although it's not scientifically valid, it's not a professional poll, I do think it's reflective of a couple things, that there's a lot of undecided. And let's take your number, Mark, and cut it in half, because it was sent out with something that was pro you and
Right.
encourage people to get to know you. But it just tells you that this is wide open right now. And which is good news for Mark Pukita. It's bad news for people that have spent literally tens of millions of dollars on trying to get their name ID and their preference up, that you see absolutely no result in the polling.
Right.
Of it.
So Chris, so people know this went out to over 241,000 classified as Republicans by the boards of election, primary voters. We got 750 responses or so. We took out those that came from people that we know are my supporters. Even if we took my number to a quarter, I'd be somewhere between Timken and Gibbons, right? And what it says is this is an absolute horse race right to the finish. And there are so many undecided voters, because I think we're in a really interesting time. It was interesting because of Donald Trump being elected in 2016, the shenanigans around the 2020 election, the whole COVID thing, and now Joe Biden being a joke. If you like my new hat I got at the C&E Gun Show at Westland Mall in Columbus here this weekend. We were there. I think that there is the people that believe they can predict how the elections are going to go in 2022. If you believe them, I got a bridge in swampland in Florida I want to sell you, because we're in uncharted territory, no matter what the pundits say.
I think the problem with some of these people is the more people see them and get to know them, the less they're likely to vote for them. The more the ads they run, the more they kind of look like just another thing that we get the same terrible results from when we keep electing these kind of things. So, but that's basically the gist. Any quick closing thoughts on tonight?
I would just say that we've got events coming up this week. We've got our Brown Bag Lunch Zoom that anybody can join on Wednesday at noon. Anybody from anywhere can join that. We welcome everyone. Friday, we've got an event here with the Promise Keeper group, which is different than the Promise Keepers used to be. These are the people that are running for state central committee, that are citizen candidates that want to make positive change. Saturday, we're in Medina at McFan in the morning, a protest downtown in Cleveland at about 11 o'clock, and then back in Columbus that evening. Next week, we got a full schedule. You can go to the website. It's mark4ohio.com and go to the events tab, and you can find them all, and you can figure out where they are, and you can come be with us and spend some time. We have a lot of fun, Chris, at our events. And you'll even get some swag there. You'll get some wooden bats or some blow up bats, depending, hats. We've got buttons. We got everything. We have been voted the campaign with the best swag. And a lot of that has to do with my campaign team.
All right. We are violating our principle of keeping these things shorter. This is probably the longest one we've had. So let's call it a wrap, Mark, for tonight. Thank you to everybody who joined us for this evening. Thank you to John Adams for joining us and answering some questions. Everybody should check out John Adams, check out Mark, and good night, everybody.
Thanks a lot.